You're listening to the Fit Mind, Fit Body podcast, where we explore the connection between running and positive mental health. We do this by talking to runners from all walks of life who generously share their experiences with us. So you don't miss an episode, I've created an email list for you to join. Check the show notes for more details. Without further ado, I'm your host, Michelle Frost. Let's get moving. Welcome to this episode of the Fit Mind, Fit Body podcast. I'm really excited today to share with you this chat with ultra runner and clinical psychologist Luke Pryor. From overcoming personal challenges to running ultra marathons, Luke's journey is nothing short of inspiring. Get ready to delve into Luke's world of running and learn how it transformed his life, the lessons he's gathered, and the tips he has for everyone looking to explore the world of running. Whether you're a beginner or a seasoned runner, there's something in this episode for everyone. Let's get moving. Today on Fit Mind, Fit Body, I am introducing you all to Luke Pryor. Hello, Luke.
Hello, how are you?
I'm awesome. Welcome to the podcast. I can see, no one else can see this because it's an audio, but you're sitting in a van at your place.
Yes, yep. So I live in a tiny home, which is quite small. Obviously, the name suggests that, but sometimes the internet's not fantastic in the tiny home. So I jumped in the back of the van, which is handy to have that space as well.
Which is an even smaller tiny home.
It is, definitely.
I love that. All right, Luke, tell me, where did you grow up? Where are you from?
I'm originally from Ballarat, down in Victoria.
Okay.
So I sort of grew up on a farm. About the first 13 years of my life was on a 100-acre farm,
Nice.
a spud and sheep farm in a small town called Millbrook, which is about 25-30 minutes out of Ballarat.
Oh, nice. And do you have siblings? Was it?
Yeah, I've got two younger brothers. Yeah.
And so it sounds like you had a very, I assume, outdoorsy sort of life on the farm.
It was fantastic. We had a great upbringing. I'm very fortunate and appreciative of the lifestyle I had growing up. It was, mum and dad were definitely not helicopter parents, and we were basically allowed to go and roam free on the farm and explore, even beyond the farm as well. As young kids, so that definitely instilled the love of adventure early on, and it was nothing for us to leave super early in the morning and then come back in the evening covered in mud and bruises and scratches and whatever else mischief that we got up to during the day. So
it's awesome. I love it. My childhood was a bit like that too. Also grew up on a farm, but on King Island. So
nice. Nice.
So similar. And we would often disappear like that too. And I think you could sometimes hear mum call like for lunch or dinner or something. But that was about it. It was awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we had that too. You kind of the wave from the front veranda or the call out from the front veranda to come back up to the house. And
that's awesome. Whereas now it'd just be, you just give them a ring or send them a text, come home now or something. Or for my kids, actually, it's probably they're not answering the phone. So it's that find my phone thing we have on Apple, and it makes their phone buzz until they pick it up. That's probably what I do. Anyway. So what was sport like for you at school? You said you were there until you were 13. Is that right?
Mum and dad, we ended up going bankrupt when I was about 13. So we had to move into Ballarat and just sort of basically rented through the rest of my childhood in Ballarat, which is where all family and that were from, so that was great. But I was very active, loved pretty much every sport, played a lot of AFL football and a lot of cricket, tennis growing up, and I would always sort of just love to sort of just practice it too. It was always a bit of a challenge. I think I just loved the challenge of trying to master something or get better at something. And my two young brothers, we played lots of sport inside the house and outside the house as well, which often ended up in, broken windows and
Yeah.
all sorts of things. But and I think my uncle was pretty instrumental too. He was a big sport fan, and he, I guess, took us under his wing a little bit and taught us the ins and outs of sport. And I think that sort of grew my love of trying to, master or kind of get better at something.
Can you remember running at school?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I remember. In primary school we'd have the 100-meter races. Or we used to play a game. I think it was called Octopus or something. It was a bit like tag of some sort. So that was always those two things were always pretty big. So there's lots of that at school growing up, but it wasn't really until probably about 19, 20 where I started to dabble a little bit more with running itself. And then it wasn't really until my late 20s, early 30s when I really got into running.
All right. And well, when you were at school, I know you said other sports were, you really enjoyed those. Do you remember thinking how you felt about running, when you had to do your school carnival or your cross country or that kind of stuff? Do you remember what your thoughts were about it?
Yeah, I remember one cross country very vaguely, in primary school. I think it was in Dalesford somewhere. Just sort of running through the bush, and have sort of fond memories of that. But they're very small fragments of memories, nothing sort of significant. And I think, I'm, I don't know, I'm about 5'3" or 163 centimeters tall. So I'm pretty short. So
wow, you're shorter than me.
Yeah, I'm pretty tiny. So,
you don't look short just on the video, just saying.
Oh, thank you. Playing football, like AFL football, if I was going to be any good at it, I'd have to run a lot. And so I think that sort of drip fed a little bit of the running into me a little bit. And I guess related running to being better at football, which I absolutely loved football. And so occasionally I would go for a 5K run or, run around the lap of the lake in Ballarat. There's the Steve Monaghetti Lake, which is 6Ks. That was often a pre-season training for football type sort of thing. So running was really about getting better at football in those days. Yeah.
What did you do when you left school? Nothing to do with sport.
I was a bit of a rat bag at high school, so I was more interested in sport and the social stuff rather than applying myself academically, shall we say. So I had a gap year where I just sort of worked full time, and then managed to get myself into university very luckily, and studied exercise science and I worked in that field for a number of years, and then sort of doing sports science, strength and conditioning sort of stuff, which was I loved, in a combination of working with like elite athletes and recreational athletes and everyday sort of personal training gym clients, and then got really interested in I guess the mental side of I guess people's behavior and what motivated them and why they did things and why they couldn't stick to plans, or why person A was better than person B in terms of their application or something. And that really spiked my curiosity into psychology, and I ended up going back to university again, and studied another 6 years of uni to become a clinical psychologist.
Whoa, you've been all over the place just in those couple of sentences there.
So I've sort of had I've really enjoyed my working life. I never really had a full-time job. I had my own business in the fitness industry for a while, but because I was I spent 10 years at university, I didn't really have a proper full-time job until I was 32. I worked all the way through university to support myself, but I always felt like I was about 10 years behind everyone in terms of people having a mortgage and all that sort of stuff. So,
I've got a daughter like that right now who's just finished her double degree in zoology and theatre, and she's now saying next year she's going to do honours, and then after that she's maybe thinking about going to do vet science. So she's going to be probably 100 before she even gets out of university, it feels like.
Yeah, nice. They're interesting combination, zoology and theatre.
Yes, I think she'll become like a Jane Goodall, somebody who goes and studies something and does a documentary about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. Anyway,
Yeah.
we'll see where she goes. Right now, yes, her jobs are all part-time jobs in, receptionist there and cafe there, that kind of thing. Anyway,
Yeah.
and she's in Melbourne. So how you said that you didn't actually start running as a sport for itself purely until you're in your 30s. Did you say that earlier, or was it sort of later?
Yeah, that's late 20s, early 30s is when I sort of got into running more seriously. I played a lot of football. I was, an okay without being great sort of football player, just in local leagues. And kind of got a bit over the meathead kind of component of football.
The blokey stuff.
And yeah, when you're kind of, late 20s and you're running around in a paddock in the middle of nowhere and people are trying to take your head off, you kind of start to question, like, what are we playing for here? It's not not like we're playing in the AFL or anything. So I guess I started to have, look for other opportunities or other areas to kind of challenge myself. And I think I'd always been, ever since I was about 18, I got really obsessed into like fitness and the gym, sort of stuff. And that was, I guess, my first real sort of major passion. So I was really a big gym goer, for, from 18 to pretty much all my 20s. And then, we'd play football in the winter, and then started doing athletics with Wendouree Athletics Club. In my 20s. I think I did one season when I was 19, and then had a bit of a break when I went back and played a lot more football for a number of years. And then it was sort of when I was 27, 28 when I jumped back in onto the Wendouree Athletics Club and did their summer and winter programs. So summer was always the shorter track, sort of sports, and then winter was my favorite, which was the cross country, I guess trail running sort of vibe, which I loved.
I love that. There's so many questions I wanted to ask you. One of them harks back to what you said earlier about not when you were like a PT type of person. Why did some people stick to what they wanted? And they all maybe had the same goal: lose weight, get fitter, run a marathon, whatever it is. But some people were able to do, stick to a routine, and others were not. Then you went on into university to study psychology stuff or whatever. What did you learn? Like, tell me, what is the answer to that question? That was
I think that's the $1 million question, isn't it? If I had a really quick, simple answer to that, I think I'd probably be doing quite well, financially, because it is the $1 million question, and I think it's complex. People. I guess I sort of went into studying psychology with that being one of the questions that I was sort of wanting to answer. And the more I studied, the more I realized that was the more questions that came up and the more complex. And I think it's try and give some answer to that. I think it really depends on the individual and where they're at. And, for some people, it's, the pain that they're in kind of starts to, be a main motivator and becomes too much for them to overcome that initial hurdle in making sort of significant life changes. Other people, it's about, significant things that happen in their life, whether they kind of get married or have kids, or, for me, I probably had, I guess this sort of ties in with my sporting sort of stuff. Like, it was a little bit Jekyll and Hyde. Like, I had like big issues with alcohol. Like, I was always someone that sort of could never had an off switch, really. Like, I was all or nothing, and that applied to the alcohol too. And it wasn't sort of it wasn't congruent with my values and who I saw as myself. But if it wasn't for fitness, early on in the gym sort of stuff and sport, and then later on running, like, I think my life would have looked very different if I didn't have that grounding activity of exercise to sort of hold me there. So for me, I guess that was a bit of a motivator for, why I was able to kind of, I guess, stick to things, and kind of because, I sort of needed to, because I knew if I didn't, my life would be out of balance in a really unhealthy way.
It's like
And maybe now it's,
I was going to say, it was like your why, your why was big enough.
that's right. Yeah. And I think that's, getting clear on your why is really important. And, when I do work with, work with athletes in the sport performance sort of space, that's a big thing, to kind of get clarity on our why. And sometimes we're doing it for the wrong reasons, which then can, I guess subconsciously, in some sense, we put these barriers and blockades in there, because when it's not congruent or authentic with what we're really wanting to do. And sometimes it's about unpacking that and kind of and developing a more healthy why that might fit better for that person. And that's where I think it's, different for everybody, but, being able to have the internal sort of strength and courage to kind of stand in your own space and go, well, actually, I don't care about performance. For me, it's just about getting out and doing 2 or 3 runs a week and feeling healthy, and being a better role model for my family, perhaps, like, without needing to kind of, get caught up in the culture of needing to run faster or longer all the time. And, it's different for everyone, but
that's really interesting. And I think I'm just coming, like, I'm 54 now. I've been running forever. It feels like, but I realize now that why I ran when I was in my 20s or my 30s or my 40s doesn't look the same in my 50s, like why I ran. So I think when you're having those conversations with people, I assume one of the things is that they understand that when they work out what their why is now, that it's fine, that it's not going to be necessarily the same why in 5 or 10 years, and that, or even next week. And that's fine, as long as it's congruent, as you said before, with who they are now. Does that make sense?
Exactly. Yeah, it does. And that's, sometimes when people go through those transition phases in their life, that's one of the challenges that they run into, is where they're, trying to hold on to something when, their body's aging or, their performance is declining, and, young and up and coming, they're trying to sort of hold on to that instead of, being more comfortable within themselves to be able to acknowledge where they're really at and what's really going on, and kind of find a healthier relationship with the sport. So, it is those interesting as we go through those transition phases.
I love it. So what work do you do now? We've got all your degrees and things that you did, or maybe we don't. Maybe there's more. What work do you do now with people?
Yeah, so I'm a clinical psychologist, and I work in private practice in Maleny a few days a week. And
in Maleny, so you're in Queensland?
Yeah, Sunshine Coast. Yep.
I was in Maleny.
Yeah.
Is that the one where the meal they have a restaurant that's on the edge of the mountains there?
Oh, that might be Montville.
Oh, Montville. But Maleny's nearby, isn't it?
It is very close.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we did a bushwalk there a couple of months ago. Anyway.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah, very lucky up here. It's a beautiful
it's
area.
Spectacular.
Yeah.
A long way from Ballarat.
It is a long way from Ballarat, and the climate's very different, and that's not by coincidence.
You're a long way from Tassie as well, where I am. Anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry. So you work in Maleny.
Yeah. So I work in private practice and do a bit of a combination of clinical, general population, mental health work. Yeah. And I also do sport performance work as well. So working a lot with endurance athletes. I've got a number of triathletes and cyclists and mountain bike athletes, awesome. and obviously runners as well that I work with. So always sort of that's the area I love to work in. So I'm kind of just slowly building up more and more clients in that area of endurance psychology and mental performance.
I love that. This is the perfect podcast for you, because I can just pick your brain all day long. Do you find that you prescribe? I asked Cheryl this too, by the way. Do you prescribe going for a run or something like that for people who come in for something that's not necessarily sport related for mental health reasons?
100%. Yeah, I do. Yeah. And it's obviously always tailored to the individual and where they're at. I think it's, first point of call is to make sure you're meeting the client with where they're at. And that might look like getting out for a walk, or, for some people that are really depressed, there might be, getting the mail from the letterbox, starting with that. So starting with something that's achievable. But, if I was to sort of step back and look at, the approach that I do take, I definitely do place a lot of emphasis on the lifestyle factors, sleep, nutrition, exercise, some sort of movement practice. I think they're sort of fundamental pillars of health and wellness, and they definitely impact our mental health, as you know. So definitely encouraging, pretty much all of my clients to engage if they're not already in some sort of form of movement that feels right to them.
So for those clients who come to you for like who have a physical background rather than necessarily the mental background, they're coming to you for like mindset type of stuff. Is that how they would frame it? Is that what they're thinking about?
Yeah. Yep. So I guess you might have I guess two camps. You're having athletes that are looking to get a bit of an edge and really focus on going from good to great and sort of trying to improve their performance. And then you'll get a lot of athletes that are coming with a particular problem, whether it's, dealing with injury or setback or performance anxiety, or loss of motivation,
I have
that sort of thing.
I have the performance anxiety when there you go. So you can diagnose. No. Like for years, I belonged to a running club here, and we race every Saturday through winter. So it's not like I haven't done a lot of racing. It's a handicap club, so we all have an opportunity to win. So it's all very exciting.
Nice.
And distances from 5 up to 21 on those 20 to 25 weeks of the year, and then various other races outside of that. But I've noticed in the last 5 or 6 years, just the anxiety before an event, not so much for those little races, just horrible. So I've had to do all kinds of stuff with myself to talk myself out of being so anxious, including changing, just not racing so much, not going to events and things, doing other things, challenging myself in other ways, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think those when you're in a small community, it can almost sort of enhance some of that anxiety, because you sort of know where you should sit, or you know where others should sit, and that can, if you're overly focused on what other people are doing,
exactly,
that can really kind of enhance that, because it's like, oh, I always beat Joe Blow, or I'm always, and if not, then it's, you start to sort of have this internal dialogue of doubt or criticism, or however that might be playing out. And I think in those situations, it is really important to kind of try and focus on yourself a little bit, and kind of use tools that evaluate your performance on your stuff, of things that you can control, rather than other people's sort of performances. But it all comes into that, I guess, that social psychology too, of like reputation and who you are and sort of stuff.
Your
and
identity.
I think that's something. Your identity. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Which we do talk in the podcast. I often run people through things like, have they been injured, and how did they deal with that? And when did they first call themselves a runner, and how do you deal with it when you then get injured? So
yes.
How about you, Luke? Have you been injured?
Yes, I have been injured. I've had this is actually something I'm trying to work on with myself at the moment, is that I've had a long history of pretty chronic injuries of plantar fasciitis, and particularly hamstring and glute tendinopathy in both hamstrings, which has sort of been pretty sort of extreme, plus a few other little foot niggles. So I've really been working hard on my, I guess, beliefs around how I communicate to myself as a runner, because I've had probably close to 7 or 8 years of always kind of managing or battling with some sort of chronic injury. So I'm really trying to be conscious about how I talk to myself as a runner, and my relationship with running and injuries. So that's something I'm working on at the moment within myself, is trying to lessen the association with, oh, I'm an injured runner, or I'm always battling some sort of niggle or whatever it might be. So that's been an interesting process. But
it is injury. Oh my gosh. I've actually had a few people on the podcast recently who've never really had an injury, which I think is amazing in itself. Just saying.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
That's wild, because there's running's hard on the body, and most runners sort of have some injury that keeps them out for more than 2 or 3 days throughout the year at some stage. Some injuries are worse than others, but
I found I recently a year ago decided to run at least 2 kilometers every day to do a streak and see. I was going to do it till Christmas time, and then then Christmas came and went, and I was still doing it, and I kept doing it, and it has helped with some of that stuff we're talking about before, with my identity and my the anxiety, because I saw the way I look at it at the moment is that I'd set myself a goal that was achievable. It keeps me running. It is actually a little uncomfortable to do it every day. Like, in a normal in your normal everyday life where things happen the same all the time, but none of us go through 12 months where every single day is a repeat of the last day. As a rule, most of us have things that happen. We go away, we travel, we do things, unexpected things happen. But to be able to maintain that, which I did just tick over a year last Friday of running 2 kilometers at minimum every single day, that's worked for me anyway, for helping with that, some of that self-talk stuff that we were talking about earlier. So I wonder sometimes whether that might help other people. Not they don't have to do what I did, but choosing a goal that can help build you up in your head.
Definitely
better about who you
are.
I suppose.
I think there's a huge amount of self-discipline in that, isn't there? Because it's it's easy to go for a run when you're feeling great and you feel like it, but
so easy.
That's not reality every single day. So there's and you gain confidence, which is sort of what sounds like you're talking about now, is within yourself, of like, hey, I did this hard thing, and I think that's the beautiful thing with running, isn't it? Like, there's this weird part of running where it's this beautiful, freeing, most natural thing that we're meant to do, but it's also very uncomfortable and often painful, and there's a lot of discomfort that goes with it too. And I think it's working with that dichotomy of trying to find the flow and the beautiful ease of running, naturalness of it, with like, I'm a back sore, or I've got a niggle, or I'm tired, I'm stiff, or whatever it is.
What do I do? So I'm doing 101 kilometers next March down here in the Gone Nuts. So that's how, it obviously has made me confident enough to think I can do that.
Fantastic. Oh, that's exciting. Is it which one's that one?
Gone Nuts, it's called. It's from Stanley through to Wynyard.
Yep, nice. Yeah, that looks like a good run, that one.
Yes, it's a challenging one. But anyway, back to your running, which is more exciting than mine, really. When do you think you called yourself a runner?
Probably when I started doing it more as for the purpose of running, rather than doing it for football or some. I think that's probably when I started identifying myself as a runner. Yeah.
How long do you think you'll run for?
Ever. Yeah.
Not that there's a wrong answer, but that's a good answer.
No, I really want to be, I want to be one of those, 85, 90-year-olds that are, still getting out there and doing some form of running, whatever distance, that's, something I really sort of aspire to. And I really, admire and find a lot of inspiration in those. You see the older guys get out there and just sort of, they're still got that spark of, looking for that adventure and that kind of that joy. And that's definitely something that I resonate with, and something I want to, aspire to do as well. So yeah, so hopefully, that's my plan, is to run for as long as I can.
Run forever.
Yeah.
What does your running look like now? We haven't really talked about the
Um,
kind of things you have done with your running.
yeah. So I guess I got into ultra running when I was about 30, 33 maybe.
Mhm.
So probably the last sort of 10 years.
Okay.
I did my second 100 miler this year in June,
Oh, wow.
which was really cool. And yeah, I've actually got Black Hole 50 coming up next weekend, which I'm using as a bit of a training run for another miler down in the Grampians in Victoria in November. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, so I'm kind of working towards the run I did in June took me a little bit of time to get over, in terms of just being a little bit banged up and tired and injured. So I'm just starting to come good now. So I'm probably doing about, I guess, not huge volume for myself, but it's probably getting up to the higher end for me. Is around about 100 kilometers a week.
Okay.
But I've also, this year I've really included a lot more cycling as well. So trying to add in a little bit extra volume with the cycling rather than just pure running, and
Yeah.
I've found that's been really helpful. So I'm trying to find the perfect
Yeah.
balance between cycling and running. And yeah, so yeah, that's kind of roughly where my running is at the moment.
Where did you say you broke up a little bit when you said that whatever your next bigger race is that you're leading into after the 50?
Yeah, so that's the Grampians Peak Trail 100 miler down in
There you go.
Victoria. So that's the
Yeah.
first year that they've had that event on, and it's I guess, I was really curious about that trail, and when I heard they were making that trail, I had aspirations to, try and do a bit of an FKT, or get down there and run the
Yeah.
length of it, and that just sort of never eventuated due to life circumstances. But as soon as they announced the event, I was like, oh, I think I'm pretty keen to run that, and you know, I think it'll be really cool because all my family are still down there as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
really keen to kind of make it a bit of a family event and go down and catch up with family, and get them to drag them through the night and as they can crew me, and really looking forward to the family component of it. So excited for that.
What motivates you to do the longer distances?
I love the challenge of it.
Mhm.
I think um, mentally, when you're out there for such a long time, it really can
Mm.
strip everything back a little bit, and challenge yourself a lot more. And there's a real problem solving component that then comes into it. And I love that component of it when things get really hard and
Yeah.
uncomfortable out there, and you've got to try and find a solution on the go. And so I love the mental sort of challenge of the longer sort of stuff,
Mhm.
particularly, if you're running through the night, and as well, and that level of fatigue sort of kicks in, and things get a little bit unhinged and a little bit weird, and you sort of have that real sort of adventure. It's kind of like, I don't know where this is going to go, or I don't know how I'm going to handle this, and just trying to kind of put yourself in that situation to sort of test and challenge yourself.
I assume it's, well, I always say this, but I assume it's trails that you you prefer as your running,
Yes.
area.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the trails. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I don't mind. I do a lot of running on the road as well, but
As your training.
and
Mm.
don't mind road running. I'll do the occasional race here on the road, but probably 80-90% of it's on the trails.
What would have been your favorite run that you've had?
Probably the one in June, which was Western States 100 miler in California.
Oh,
So
wow.
um, that was a pretty epic experience to head over there to just get into the event. It's
Yeah.
a really difficult event to get into. There's only 370 runners that are lucky enough to run it every year. And I'd
Amazing.
been entering the lottery for 6 years to try and get my number pulled out so I could go over and run it. And yeah, it was this year was my lucky year. Yeah, got to go over there, and just the hype and just the event,
Yeah.
everything that people talk about around that event is definitely true. And it was its 50th year anniversary year this year too,
Oh,
which is
wow.
really cool. Yeah. And yeah, I had a pretty good run over there. As well as any 100 mile I can go. It has its ups and downs, but yeah, had a fantastic run. And yeah, just an amazing experience at a real sort of peak life moment to get to run over there.
That's fantastic. Is that one of the ones where you get a buckle?
Yeah, yep. So you
Excellent.
get the silver or bronze buckle with Western States. So if you finish under 24 hours, you get the silver buckle, and then if you finish between 24 and 30 hours, you get the bronze buckle. And yeah, I was fortunate enough to finish in 23 hours, so got
Whoa.
the silver buckle. So that was really cool. Yeah.
That's so good. um, it just there's something, we talked about the anxiety in a big race. Like I've done lots of marathons and those sort of things on the mainland. But the idea of traveling to go so far away to do such a big thing, I'm like, my nerves would just be a mess.
Yeah, it's definitely a component I think people don't realize until you're in sometimes. We don't
Mm,
talk about it, but financially, it's a huge cost to go overseas
yeah,
somewhere and do a big run. And then to get over there, and we sort of, my partner and I, Cara, we sort of planned a little bit of a holiday around it. And to get over there, and then you really want to have a good day out. You want to finish the,
yeah,
number one, kind of finish the event and actually, have a positive experience over there. So I think getting to that start line, and giving yourself the best chance, it can be really nerve wracking. And I didn't have the best preparation in the lead up to this run. I had a couple of niggles and a foot issue that I sort of carried into the race. So as we were traveling around, I was stopping at every sort of frozen creek and putting my foot in the creek for a couple of times a day, just trying to get my body
wow,
as healthy as I could on the start line. And so I definitely can. There is a lot of anxiety and a lot of nerves
yeah,
around that when you kind of do make a big commitment, because it's I'm just an everyday kind of runner. I'm not sponsored. I'm paying for it all out of my own pocket. And
mm,
and am I ever going to get a chance to go back and run Western States again? Probably not. Like maybe, but probably unlikely. So yeah, definitely that was managing the nerves and just trying to stay in the moment and just embrace the experience was one of the challenges, given that I was a
yeah.
little bit niggly going into it.
But you managed to do it, and within the silver buckle time. So
Yes,
awesome.
yeah. So it was a great experience. And even after the event, a few days after the event, it was quite emotional. And just sort of in that post run fatigue and exhaustion, and just sort of thinking about what we achieved with
Mm.
Cara and I. We both put in a lot of work to get me there. And just sort of share that experience with her. And the sacrifices that we'd both made was pretty special.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Just we know when a plan comes together and all that, as you said, the sacrifices that go into preparing for an event like that. It's
Yeah,
awesome when it all comes off. It's fantastic.
yeah, definitely, yeah.
Can you think to a time where it could be a training run or it could be a race, doesn't matter, or an event, where everything just flowed and at some point you just felt it's just all amazing.
Yeah, that is a good question. I've definitely, I don't think I've had the perfect race in that sense of like from start to finish. I've
Mm-hmm.
definitely had some races where there's been moments of that. Um, I think probably the closest race in its entirety was probably Western States, just because it
Okay.
was just
The
such a
build up and
special
the
of, yeah, just the hype around it. And just I was just pinching myself the whole time I was out there. So I think from that perspective, even though it had some ups and downs, throughout it was pretty special. But I think maybe can't remember what year it was, but the Blackall 100 kilometer race. I had this one year, it's probably 2017, 2018, maybe. I had a shocking sort of first half. My hamstring tendon stuff was really playing up, and then I was nearly about to sort of pull out, and a couple of good friends kind of got me to smash down some ginger beer and some food, and sort of recalibrated me. And the second half of that race, I probably ran the best second half of a race I've ever sort of run, and just felt like that sort of experience where it was just you were just in flow the whole time. And so that was a really cool experience, and a good lesson in not giving up, and you never know how things might sort of turn around, because the first half of the race it was complete polar opposites to the second half.
All I heard was ginger beer. Ginger beer is the secret.
The secret recipe.
It is true though. Like having, as I said, and I've done a couple of ultras, not 100, but I've done a couple. And there in every one of those, longer events, there are moments where it just all feels like crap. And then the next thing you know, you've forgotten that because everything's actually feeling quite crazy. And the last 10Ks went by, in a blink. It's kind of it's crazy how your mind plays with you. Can you think of a time where your running supported your life? Like there were things going on in your life where it was crappy and not fun, but when you went for a run, you got that kind of relief or whatever. I don't want to put words into your mouth, but it supported what was going on in your life personally.
Yeah. There's like hundreds of examples of that. Running, it is kind of like a rock in that sense for me, in good times in life and in more difficult times. And there's been times with as I mentioned earlier, with struggling with addiction and alcohol sort of stuff, where running literally did save my life. Like that's not being dramatic at all. Like if it wasn't for running, my life would have looked very different. Whether it's sort of a relationship breakup, or to something like a bad day at work, running is that perfect kind of space where you kind of get to process some of the emotion by some movement, and then you get some sort of time to think and some space to sort of think and to gain some clarity, and perhaps get some bigger perspective on whatever the issue is at the time. And I think that is probably a big role that running does play in my life, whether it's big stuff or small stuff, from just big tired day at work and just needing to clear your head, to more bigger life sort of things as well that we all go through.
We've spoken on the podcast before about the times where, I don't know, even as simple as work's overloaded, or you've had an argument with your partner or whatever, and you think, all kinds of stuff. I can't go for a run. I don't have time for that at the moment, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is, as you just pointed out, and you're very educated to confirm this, actually is the time when you probably should go for a run, or those times where life is really stressful, that you are able to process what's going on in your life that's perhaps not so pleasant or pleasant. It works both ways. But it's often the time when we drop it because we don't have time for that, because it feels selfish, or it feels, like I've had, my parents be really ill, for example, and you're dealing with all that emotion and all of that kind of stuff. And then, but you think I've got to go and help them and do things, and you think I don't have time. It's just an example.
Yeah.
But actually, if you don't go, you won't, there will be other repercussions. It's actually going to help you be more supportive person, or whatever the thing is that's going on. It's just interesting that a lot of us will drop it because it feels like a selfish thing, or we don't have time for it. But actually, we need to have time, I suppose.
Yeah, I think there can be that guilt associated with that too, because in some ways, running, particularly long distance running, it is a very selfish, sport where you give up many hours of your weekend, and then you get back and you're tired and exhausted, and your partner or whoever wants your family, your kids are excited to see you or whatever, and it's you don't have the energy or that sort of. So
Yeah.
there can be some guilt associated with that sort of stuff, and I think a lot of people struggle with that. But I think it's about balance, but also about you recognizing that am I a better version of myself when I run? And if the answer is yes, which I haven't heard too many people say the opposite to that question, then maybe it's about going, well, okay, maybe I'll just get out for 5 minutes and go for a jog and
Yeah.
come back, because you'll definitely probably be in a different mood than when you left.
Yeah, absolutely. I did a write up the other day about my 365 days of running straight. And one of the things that I put in there was that it's time for me, like, am I going to stop? Not at the moment, but it's time for me to be with my thoughts, but also get rid of, like, be without them at the same time. So you can, as you said before, process what's going on in your mind, but you can also stop your mind a bit, concentrate on your breath, concentrate on being where you are at the trail or wherever you're running. So it has both, you can do both in those when you're out for a run, which can help you deal with a lot of those things that are going on in your life too, which I think is
Definitely.
quite fascinating. Anyway,
Yeah.
when you're training for these big long distance events that you do, how do you fit it in? Like, you have a professional career and, you've got to fit in cycling as well. And obviously other things you do in your life. So how do you fit it all in?
It's like I'm a little bit blessed in the sense that I've probably, prioritized it in a big part of my life. So, I don't have children, which is obviously a big time thing for a lot of people. And I'm often, inspired and amazed at, people that have, bigger, fuller family lives than I do, and how they manage it all. And I think it comes down to priorities, and a little bit what we were just sort of talking about is recognizing, hey, I'm a better version, whether it's a better partner, a better parent, a better family member, or just a better person in general with some exercise. And I think making sure we sort of prioritize that, because life is busy and it's often out of balance at certain times.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay for life to be out of balance at times, as long as you're aware of where that scale is a little bit. When you're going through uni, for example, life is out of balance. It's more about study and you're not earning a lot of money. But then it becomes about career and maybe family. So maybe family is a little bit bigger, and maybe early on in your kids' lives, like, your exercise is a little bit smaller, and maybe it's about getting out for a 20-minute run 3 times a week, and maybe that's what you can manage. But so it's about, but then several years down the track, that might shift a little bit, and you might have more free time to do that. But I think it's about working with that balance, being able to prioritize what is most important in your life, but also connecting with the value of how exercise in general can support those other areas of your life as well. Yeah.
And I guess going back to what we said earlier too, that it's also a season thing, isn't it? Like, your kids are only little for a while. I've had a bunch of kids, but I don't have to be worried about them anymore. So, at home, they don't take up all the time anymore. So, so I have more time to do those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think those, maybe when your kids are little, maybe it's about, being that role model too, and taking your kids out for a little walk or a hike, or just getting some time on the trail somewhere. It might not be the perfect run or training session that you wanted to get, but you can still find creative ways to sort of tap into that has, then positive influences on other people in your life as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's sort of, you can incorporate that into your life as well.
Yeah, I love that. There's so much example of, on the podcast that I've talked to parents, male and female, who have, just been an amazing example for their children, and a number of them going back, it was their parents who were an amazing examples to them. They could reflect on that and see how that has also affected their lives and what they're now doing with their children. And so it's very cool that just when it keeps giving like that.
Yeah. I think you can't understate the power of being that positive role model, particularly for your children and that sort of stuff. If you want them to be be active and live a healthy lifestyle, then you probably need to lead by example on that. So, part of it is about maybe, being cognizant of that and working that into it. And I guess that's a good way to kind of manage some of that guilt that some parents might have around,
It's true.
not being able to, I'm wasting too much time out running. I should be home with the family. And, I think there's a huge amount of value in kids seeing a parent that's passionate about something and following that and chasing goals, whether it's, sport or academic or creative outlets. Like, I think there's, so many more powerful lessons that we can sort of teach our children or people around us through our actions in that sort of sense. So.
Yeah, I love that. Is it, when I already talked about how you fit it in, but do you have any kind of hints or tips that, on those rainy days or the days where, you're just not feeling like it, but you need to go because you've got this big event coming up? How do you get yourself out the door on just those on a micro level rather than the big macro stuff?
Yeah. So one thing I always do, I always have my running gear with me in some, whether it's just tucked into my bags. Yep. So it's really easy to get to. I've got a client that cancels and, maybe I was a bit slack in the morning and didn't get up and run in the morning, but I'm going to take my running gear to work just in case there's a couple of no-shows where I can maybe get in a little bit of a run. Excellent. And fit it in. So I think always having your running gear with you is a very good, good tip. I think connecting with your bigger motivations of it. If I've got a big race coming up, I love to sort of draw up a handwritten calendar and kind of mark the days off so I can kind of see the visual representation of it. And when I wake up, it's one of the first things I sort of see. So if I'm feeling a bit tired and that sort of thing, it's about, it's sort of in your face there and you're like, okay, we've got to get over that initial hurdle. And then I think it's what can be really helpful is not just think in the moment. Don't think too far ahead about, I've got to do that tempo session and it's going to be hard. Like first, okay, I'm just going to get my runners on first, or I'm going to have my coffee first, or I'm going to have my breakfast first, and then I'm going to put my running gear on, breaking it down and sort of just, going through step by step. Because when you wake up and you're feeling tired, it can feel a bit overwhelming to go, I've got this 20K run to do or whatever, and you're not feeling like it and it's cold and wet outside. But I think if you, just sort of, zoom in and go, okay, what do I need to do first? I need to get up and go to the bathroom and have a coffee, and then just step by step work through that. And, by the time you've done some of that sort of stuff, your mood has probably changed a little bit from that sort of sleepy state when you first wake up and you, I don't know, maybe sore and stiff and the last thing you feel like doing is running. But and then get out and just start slow, start slow.
Slow is good. Do you have a coach?
Not at the moment. I have had numerous coaches in the past. And found them all very helpful and learn a lot from each of them in their own sort of ways. Yeah. But at the moment, I don't. And I did have a coach leading into Western States, which was great. And then just with some niggles and whatnot, I sort of put that on pause and have just been enjoying playing around with it myself at the moment.
Wow. Do you run with other people?
Not a lot, to be honest. I am probably a lot more of a solo runner. I do run, my partner runs, so I run with her a little bit. Wonderful. And then, obviously have a group of friends that I run with semi-regularly as well. But I probably do 98% of my running by myself. And I quite like that.
Do you listen to anything apart from your thoughts?
Sometimes depends on the day. I try not to run with music or podcasts all the time, but I will often listen to some music or podcasts when I'm running. Depending on the run. If it's a harder run, generally I'll listen to some music and whatnot. If it's a bit of a lot easier recovery run, generally I'll go for a podcast or some professional development of some sort. I
do a lot. I used to call it my mobile university.
Yes.
Because I'm always listening to like professional development type stuff quite a lot.
I think it's helpful for that. I
think it's good. I think I've got a tiny bit of ADHD as well. And so being able to do two things at one time is really helpful. It's like I can run and I can listen and learn. So I'm happy.
Definitely. Yeah.
It's kind of
Nice.
funny.
Nice.
Um, Now you've given us a lot of really interesting things to think about. I love all the stuff that you're doing with, with your work, and then bringing that into the sports side of it, and the running side as well. It's just amazing. What are you most excited about at the moment when it comes to the intersection between what you do for work and the running? Like, I don't. That's a kind of strange question, but
Yeah.
you study a lot, obviously, and as you said, you do the personal development, and so you're on the edge of all this stuff. Just
Yeah.
What fascinates you about? What do you?
Maybe two things. I'm in an interesting period in my career where I am sort of starting to go a lot more into the endurance sort of sports psychology area. So really kind of excited for that. But I think maybe maybe what your question was more getting at was probably the role that compassion plays in sport, and particularly endurance sport. I think we can often and it's very motivating to sort of see that David Goggins type sort of mentality of just getting out there and crushing it, and having a big amp up and taking souls, and all of that sort of stuff. And it's it's very very acute, short term kind of amped up sort of
initial motivation.
Initial motivation, and kind of toughen up type sort of stuff. But I think which that sort of stuff has its place in small doses, I think. But I'm really excited for the evolution of maybe a little bit bigger and better understanding of how compassion plays in dealing with difficult times. And when you look at endurance sport, you're out there and you're suffering a long time, and compassion is really about being able to sit with that suffering and then do something to alleviate that suffering.
So that's self-compassion.
And I think, and I think the more athletes can tap into that and use that as a resource, I think that's going to serve them a hell of a lot better in the short term, in terms of if they're going through a difficult thing in a run, but also long term in terms of over their life of running,
or just in life,
well.
trickles into their life as well outside 100%. Of running.
Yeah, 100%.
Funny how that happens. Running isn't just what happens when you're running, which is an interesting.
No, exactly.
Yeah,
and I think that's what I love about running and my work is that it's you can't separate running and life, and the lessons that you learn from life can be applied to your running, and the rest of the lessons you learn from your running can be applied to your life, and there's a beautiful kind of relationship there.
It's a great synergy.
Yeah.
A lot of the books and things that I read and listen to, of course, talk a lot about how running is, basically the answer to everything, which of course I believe, because it's one thing that we've in our modern life that harks back to before we got a house that we could live in with running water and things like that, and supermarkets to go to. Running was something that we had to do if we were surviving. And so all of our ancestors, it's all in all of our genetics, which probably brings me into a question about the growth of, I don't know if it's just because I'm doing this podcast or what it is, but the growth of ultra distance running, it feels like it's really grown a lot in the last 4 or 5 years. Would you agree?
Definitely. I think there's definitely been a boom, and I think that probably started. I probably started ultra running at the start of that boom a little bit, and I think it's growing exponentially at the moment. And and there's lots of reasons for that, I think. But I think one that you sort of touched on is that we're probably looking for outlets to put ourselves in those uncomfortable, challenging situations that the comfort of our modern lives, are very safe and very secure and very certain. We kind of, know what the outcome is going to generally be if we follow this. Whereas, you go sign up to a 100-kilometer race or something, you don't know what the outcome is going to be. You're not sure how you're going to manage the hard times. And I think, a lot of us are, as a, craving and seeking that challenge.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Also, it's interesting because what we do know is if we sit on the couch and don't regularly do exercise, whether it's running or not, but of course I would prefer that it was running because I'm a bit biased. If you don't, then we actually can also predict where, that you are not going to have a very healthy rest of your life. Like
Yep.
it's not going to be pleasant. There's going to be a lot of pain. There's going to be illness and a lot of hospital visits involved. Whereas if you have a regular exercise regime, that's a little bit like running regularly, for example, and other things, then you can avoid some of that. But of course,
Definitely.
as you know, we're built with nothing's changed in our brain in the last however many thousands and thousands of years. So our brain is still thinking that we need to conserve our energy because any minute now we have to run away for a saber-toothed tiger or catch something to eat.
Yes.
So we
To
need to
survive
conserve
the
our
next
energy.
famine.
Exactly.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's that always fighting that urge to to get up and go and not conserve the energy. I think most of us know about that intellectually, but then still get sucked into another episode of something on Netflix.
Yes. The reality of what we know and our behaviours is often very different.
Yeah, I find it fascinating, but there's also that thing, as you were saying then, about that adventurous spirit, that thing that we're realizing we are missing out. We can't actually articulate it very well, but we feel like there is something missing when we don't explore new things, or it's yeah, it's kind of hard to. I'm not very good at articulating it. Probably other people are better than me. No.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree. And I think if, people I think most people, if they sort of sit in one of those spaces too long, whether they, put on weight or they kind of get too much in that comfort zone, they do that again, that pain becomes too much where they like have a bit of a hard look at their life and go, okay, something needs to change. And
yeah. They go see someone like you, can help me. I used to be a runner.
Exactly.
And I really want to run again, but I can't get my head around it. Can you help me? Those kind of things. All right. We could talk for ages about some of this stuff because it's, right up my alley. My thing is all about mindfulness and running and how we can be in the moment when we're running as well. And that's one way you can also deal with some of the uncomfortableness with running. But
100%.
that also filters down into our lives and makes us more present and more able to deal with all of the good and the bad that happens in everybody's life. So
yes,
there's a lot of synergy there. But I've kept you waiting. I've kept you on the podcast for long enough. What I would like to ask, is there anything about running in general that we haven't touched on in the podcast that you would like to share? I'll ask you for tips in a minute, but just running in general that we might not have.
Good question. Nothing comes to mind immediately. I think maybe just encouraging people to get out and challenge themselves, like stretch themselves a little bit. If it's stepping up to a 10K from a 5K, or doing that marathon that's always been nagging. I'll do a marathon one day. Maybe it's definitely. I think there's a lot of value in pushing your comfort zone a little bit in that way.
There is. You can learn a lot about yourself.
Yeah.
I love that. Can you, before we go and before I ask you about the tips, how do you think your life would be had you not decided running was a sport that you were going to maintain? You weren't going to be a runner.
Yeah. That is a big question. It'd be fascinating if I could actually look into a crystal ball and see what that would look like. But I don't think I'd like what I would see. I'd probably be an alcoholic on the street somewhere.
Wow.
It probably would be that sort of that extreme. So I think running really did kind of save my life and get me through some of those difficult times in my life, and was that anchor that was there to kind of pull me out when I had periods of depression or had alcohol had sort of got on top of me a little bit. So I think my life would be very, very different now. And I am forever grateful for running being a big part of my life.
Yeah. Like it really is such a powerful thing. Like for you said that. I've had lots of people on the podcast say similar things with different life journeys, but you just think, why isn't it being prescribed to, for every, like, it is really a very powerful thing, and it's accessible. Like, that's what I love about it so much. And I probably should get off my soapbox, but yeah, it is just accessible to everybody, almost everybody. And it's just a pair of shoes and you can head out the door. You don't need anything apart from that. It's pretty.
Yeah, exactly.
And it can solve so many things that might be going on in your life that are not, not welcome. So.
No, for sure. Yeah. And I think that kind of, in terms of the tips that you were asking, like, that's what I would sort of give is don't complicate it. Like, keep it simple. You don't need the latest, greatest running vest or the running watch. You don't even need a watch. Just get out and go for a run. And if a run for you is 30 seconds, then great. Start there and sort of build up. And I think keeping it simple is really powerful.
So that would be your main tip for a beginner runner.
Yeah, keep it simple. Don't get caught up in all the latest fads and gear and that sort of stuff. Like, if that comes and you enjoy that sort of stuff, great. But don't let that be a barrier for you just sort of getting out the door and going for a little bit of a run.
Yeah.
And if you and I think if you go for a 30-second run, then you can call yourself a runner. That thing that people always say, I'm not a runner. Like, yeah.
I think it was somebody on the podcast. It's a question I often ask is, do you call yourself a runner? When did you do that?
Yeah.
I had someone who's been running. I definitely call them a runner, maybe 15 years. I don't call myself a runner. Okay. It's up to you. I can't give you that identity. So anyway, it was quite funny how people do that. Anyway, Luke, it's been amazing. I could talk to you for ages. Don't go straight away because I will talk to you a little bit more off the recording. But thank you so much for spending some time and being really inspiring. I'm sure you've motivated heaps of people out there to either start running or keep running. So thank you.
No, beautiful. It's great to connect. And thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to the Fit Mind, Fit Body podcast. I'd love to talk to you about your running journey. Send me a message on Facebook or on the website and let's do it. I also wanted to let you know that I've created an email list so you won't miss any podcast episodes. You'll find details in the show notes and on the Fit Mind, Fit Body website, along with a bunch of resources on mindful running. They'll help you to get and stay mentally and physically fit. And I'll see you there. Plus, I'll be back here in your podcast player a few times a week. Hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And before you go, I'd really appreciate it if you would leave a review. It'll help more people to find the podcast and get inspired to start running and ultimately to improve their life. See you soon.